All right, I'm going to show you how to start your Unreal Engine project to start creating a scene or a world for your Metahuman character. And I want everybody to do this so that you have a chance to import your Metahuman character and put it in a basic environment. And then you'll take one of your environments for your group forward in the group project. So first of all, I'm going to make sure I launch my Epic Games. I've got Unreal Engine selected here. I'm going to go to the library at the top to check and see what version I'm using. This is 5.4.4, which is the latest one. If I look at my installed plugins, I do have the Metahuman plugin installed here for 5.4. And I'm going to go ahead and launch this either here or here to start a new project that will have the scene that I'm going to develop. So once this project launches, I'm going to do a basic scene and build it up with the skyboxes that we developed using Skybox AI at Blockade Labs. So these are all the skyboxes that we created, and I downloaded them all from Blockade Labs and zipped them up and uploaded them to the Moodle page for this course, and go ahead and download those, unzip them, and you can choose any skybox you want. You can take those skybox into Photoshop to edit them too. For the scene itself, we're going to create a new games project using the blank template. We don't need anything right here. We might put some starter content in later, but we don't really need it right now. Actually, yeah, okay, we'll put it on here. I'll turn on the starter content for now. That'll give us a few things that we can use. And then what I want to do is I want to give it a name. So we'll call this one my Macbeth scene. And I'm just going to put demo on mine. It's a little bit too long, or okay, this project file already exists. Let's just call this demo 2. And I'm putting this into my Unreal Engine projects for my course here. So on my desktop. So create a folder somewhere on your desktop, maybe in your courses for Unreal Engine projects, and add this one there. You can also put your name on it if you want to. I think that's not a bad idea. So I could have this, instead of putting Macbeth, I could put Topher scene demo. I don't need the 2 in this case, and hit create. And when I do that, it's going to create the project with all the associated folders that I'm going to need. And the main one being the content folder, where I'm going to put my HDRI background. So while this is sort of loading up, there is some things that I'm going to load first, just to make sure that it's going to be in the right setting for this. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to go down to my content drawer and click on it, and I'm going to dock it in the layout. I like to have my content drawer docked, so I'm going to click on that. And that should just leave it in there. So I'm just trying to get this to dock where I want it to go. Let's see. Yeah. So that's what I want right there. So someone else was using this computer and they changed the layout that I prefer. So I'm just resetting it. And when I chose to dock it, which leaves it open, it didn't actually dock it in the place that I wanted it. But you can grab the name of any of these windows and drag them around and dock them into the place that you want. And where I prefer to have my content browser is sort of right here next to my details and outliner and at the bottom of the screen. So, but not overlapping my details panel. So, I had to drag it a little bit to get it to go where I wanted it to go. Now, what you're going to notice with this particular sort of default layout that comes in is that you have all these mountains, you've got all these landscape pieces, and we really don't want all that in here. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. And the easiest way to get rid of it would be to just create a new scene by going to the top file menu and do a new level. And we're going to do a new level that is a basic level. So not the open world level that we currently have. We're going to click basic and hit create. It's going to look similar, but now it's much simplified in the outliner. So you can see that there's actually not that much in there. There's a floor, which we're going to get rid of. And then there's just clouds and stuff and atmosphere and a player start. So that's going to be easy for us to sort of customize as opposed to the other one, which had all kinds of landscape stuff in there. So I want to save this, and everything that we do is really going to go into the content folder down in the content browser. And if you look at it, it has some starter content in there. That's what we turned on at the beginning, which there's going to be some stuff in here that could be useful later on. But mainly, we want to add stuff to the content level of this file structure. And I'm going to go ahead and right-click on the empty area with content selected. I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm just going to call it scenes and hit enter. And that new folder is where I'm going to save this scene that I just created, this empty or basic scene. And we'll just do a save current level as, and we'll call it scene start or something like that. Could put Macbeth or something. Macbeth scene start would be fine. And I'm going to put it, I'm going to double click into my scenes folder here so that I'm going into scenes, and that's the name. We'll go ahead and save it. And if you look in scenes, there we can see it's there. And we want it to open to this scene every time. So there's something called project settings, which you can see I've got docked at the top here. And normally it's, I think when you come in and go to edit project settings, it's not going to be docked up here the way mine is. It's going to be floating. If I grab this and pull it out, it'll open like a floating window like this. But I'd like to have my project settings docked all the time. So I would click that name with your left mouse button and drag it up and dock it on the top of your window, so that I have my normal views on the left, and then I have project settings. And then I might have something like bridge, which you can get to under window if you're in the regular view. If you go to window, there's going to be a Quixel bridge in there. We're going to use that too. I'll just close it for now since we don't need it right now. But now I've got my regular window set up and project settings, and they're tabs at the top of my interface right under my file edit window tools. And so, and you'll notice it's context sensitive, this top menu. When I click on different things, it changes, and the stuff inside changes too. So there's only a few things here, but if I click here and go to window, there's a bunch of things. So they're context sensitive, they're going to change, and that's usually a good thing. So I'm going to go to project settings and maps and modes. And this is something you always want to do when you start off a project, is when you create your scene that you're going to work on, you want to go to maps and modes and change the default maps, because the startup map, you want it to always open to the one that you just made. So in my case, it's Macbeth scene start. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to do it as my default map too. So what that does is that's going to make sure that whenever I open my project, it's going to open to this scene, this map, and that's convenient. Otherwise, people open their project and think that they lost all the things that they worked on, because it doesn't open to the one that they were working on in the latest iteration. It opens to the original one because they never changed this. So you want to change this, and every time you make a new, if you do a save scene as again and make a new file, you're going to want to come in here and change this. Now, technically, you don't have to do a file save all when you change a project setting like that. You can look in the lower right to see that it says all saved, which means that everything's saved. And also you'd see a star up here next to Macbeth scene start if it wasn't saved. But you do want to save it regularly, because otherwise it might glitch and you might lose work. So I've got my scene here, and the first thing I want to do is I want to bring in an HDRI background so I can sort of start setting things up. I also want to bring in my Metahuman. Now, the Metahuman takes the longest time to bring in, so I'm going to do that first so it gives it some time to actually load up. And you do that by going to Quixel Bridge, which I showed you a second ago. If I go to Window, Quixel Bridge, it's going to bring up Bridge. Again, it's probably going to be in a floating window like this. Go ahead and grab the name of Bridge and dock it. And then go in and make sure that you're signed in the upper right. You can see I'm actually signed in. But if you're not, you're going to sign in with your Epic Games account login and password. If you're signed in and you go to Metahumans, it should have a My Metahumans. If you're not signed in, it will only have the regular Metahuman presets, and you won't be able to get to your custom Metahuman. So you want to be able to click on My Metahumans and see your custom Metahumans that you made using the Metahuman creator. And so this is the latest one that I did. And I'm going to go ahead and download that one. So to download it, you click on it, and then in the right-hand side here, there's a little download button. You got to click on it. Now, I would use medium quality for what we're doing because it's going to take a little less time than high quality. You have different choices of quality here. Low quality, we're putting these up on the wall eventually, so maybe low quality might not look so great. Medium quality should look fine. Highest quality is going to look the best, but it's going to take longer and be a bigger file size. So I would go with medium quality for now. And just click the download button. You're going to see it go around. Now, I've already done that with this one, so it's going to save a little time if I don't click it again. And then once it's done going around and downloading it, and this might take a while, this blue add button is going to pop up. Otherwise, it'll be grayed out. And then once the blue add button pops up, you can click it to add it to your currently open scene. So I'm going to click on that and see if it'll go ahead and add it for me. And I can see that it is adding it to the scene. And I'm going to go over to my scene. And I should now see a Metahumans folder under content, which wasn't there before. And if I open up that Metahumans folder, there's now Topher Metahuman 2024. That's the one that I wanted to download. And if I click on that, under that, there's going to be a bunch of folders, and then there's going to be a blueprint class with the name of the Metahuman and BP, which means blueprint underscore at the beginning. That's my actual Metahuman blueprint for this character that I'm going to want to pull into my scene. Now it's going to take a little while to load this up. And so to make this go faster, I'm going to double click the blueprint here to open it, which will force it to sort of update faster. And when I double click it, you're going to see it's going to load a bunch of stuff. And it might even have these things come up that says enable missing plugins. And so I'm going to click on each one of these to enable it. And then it might ask you to restart. So this is why you want to actually double click it to open it, because it's going to force all this to happen. And it might take a little bit of time for it to load it all up once it processes all of this. So it says there's new plugins available. I'm just going to dismiss this for now. And it says one asset editor was open. If you click yes, it's just going to open up whatever it previously had open, which in this case was that Metahuman blueprint. So I'll go ahead and say yes to that. And it should open up the Metahumans blueprint again. And this is where it might take some time because it's loading up all the shaders and stuff for that Metahuman. Even though it's a medium quality, it might take some time. I don't know why I have this content browser sitting in the middle of my interface here. So there's the Metahuman one. It finally loaded up. I'm going to grab the name here and dock it up here on the top. it opened my live link thing, which I usually have open. I'm going to close that. You probably won't have that open. And then this content browser that kind of popped up with architecture selected, I don't know why that happened. I'm just going to close this window. So now I have untitled, project settings, bridge, and BP Topher Metahuman across the top. Now you notice that it didn't take my project settings, and maybe that's because I restarted it in the sort of the middle before I got to the point of closing this or something. I'm going to go to maps and modes again and check it. See, it says open world. That's not what it should say there. I did this before. I don't know why it didn't take. Again, I think it's because it restarted. I'm going to go ahead and do it again. Go to File, Save All. And I need to go find my scenes folder. Here's where people think they lose work because it opens to that original one again. I'm going to go and double click the Macbeth scene start, which will have the one that I started to create. And so now it should be right. It's in there, but we'll see if it takes this time. All right, so the BP Metahuman, I'm going to go to the viewport for that. And you'll notice it's grayed out and there's things that are not showing up. That's because it's still loading up shaders for this Metahuman. And it might even say that down in the lower right. I don't see anything saying that right now. The main thing that I want to do with this Metahuman right now is to just go to in the viewport of the BP Topher Metahuman. There, you'll see your Metahuman, but you'll see it change when I zoom in and zoom out. See, you see things changing on the hair and stuff like that. And all of that has to do with the levels of detail, LODs. And so there's this LOD sync in the left-hand side. There's components for all the parts of this Metahuman. And one of them is LOD sync. And when you click on it, you'll get details on the right for that. And under the LOD section, there is number of LODs. It says there's 8 LODs on this. And the forced LOD says -1, which means that there is no forced LOD. It's just going to change to different LODs out of those 8 based on how far you're zoomed in on the character. And what that does is it changes the look of it, and it can make it pop different kinds of hair as it's, say, running or moving, or if you're zooming your camera away from it. In our case, this is not going to be a game character, so if we were doing a cinematic where we were animating the camera, the hair could change as the camera gets further or closer to the character. We don't really want that. We want to force an LOD at the highest level, which is 0. So 0 is the highest quality LOD, and I just clicked on here and typed in 0 and hit enter. And now I'm going to compile that in the upper left until it changes from yellow to green. And now the hair and skin and everything will stay the same, no matter how far away or zoomed in we get. It's always going to stay the same level of detail. And you can see it's a pretty good level of detail. It's probably still loading a few things. So we'll check it again in a little while after it's all loaded up. So if I go back to the Macbeth scene start, I pretty much, I have my character in there, and I'll go ahead and pull the Metahuman in. So make sure you have your Metahumans folder open in the left side of the content browser and go to the whatever is the name of your Metahuman, that folder, and find the blueprint and click on it again. And you want to left mouse button drag this into your scene. So I'm going to drag it into my scene and I'm going to drop it, let go of it with the left mouse button. And you can see in the upper right is where you see what's in your scene. And now I can see that BP_Topher Metahuman 2024 is in my scene. And if I look down in the details, this is going to show me, because I have it selected currently, it's going to show me the details for this and where it is in 3D space under the transforms. The transforms are the XYZ, that's red, green, blue, XYZ, of 3D space for location, rotation, and scaling. And what I want is this to be right in the middle of my world. And right now it's -310 in X. So I'm going to click this little arrow button, which resets these location properties to 0. And then I know where the middle of my scene is, because my character is standing in the middle of my scene. And it's facing down the Y-axis. So if I want to sort of orient myself to how this scene is set up, I can put my cursor into the scene, use the right mouse button, I can orbit. I can also, with the Metahuman selected as it currently is, I can hit the F key and it will frame it. And then I can also hold the Alt button down on my keyboard, and with the left mouse button, with my cursor in the window, left mouse button, I can orbit around the character until I'm looking straight on at the character. I can also hold Alt down and middle mouse button and left mouse button to sort of do a nice smooth dolly out. If I use my wheel on my mouse, it's going to jump really far. So I usually try not to use the wheel on my mouse unless I really need to go a far distance. But now I can see my Metahuman. I can see how the light is set up, and I'm looking down the Y-axis. And the X is to the side and Z is up. That's how the 3D world is set up in Unreal Engine. And in the lower left of that 3D view, you can see the world axis there. And you can see that this character is set up according to the world axis, facing down the Y. So once I can see where my character is, I would like to bring in my skybox. And I'm going to try to organize it. So I will go to my content folder down in my content browser, click on the content folder, right-click in the empty area, and create a new folder, and I'll call it HDRIs. No spaces in the names. Just get used to that. I'll hit enter, and we have a new folder, and I'll double click into it. And this is where I'm going to drop my HDRI files that I want to put as a background on this. Now, one thing I want to notice is that there's a little star next to the name of this scene. I'm going to do a file save all. I can see in the lower right, it says to unsaved. I'm going to go ahead and save all. So what I want to do here is go check my files that I want to bring in as an HDRI. And you can see that I have all of them here. And you might want to go in and adjust some of them. I mentioned this the other day. I didn't really do it. You can see I've got a few HDRs here. I'll go ahead and let's open up this one in Photoshop, for instance. And I'll just mention a couple of things that I do sometimes when I'm adjusting these. So here's one that I created. We'll just put it to fit on screen. I am using the latest Photoshop here. And this one is kind of a night scene, and it's got some interesting sort of red that I put into the sky. I used one of the sort of illustration type of renders or styles in the AI skybox, and it's not. It looks pretty realistic, but it's not totally realistic. But I think that's okay for a background. And I'm gonna go in and maybe adjust some of the lighting in here. So one of the things that you're going to find sometimes is that it'll make really dark shadows, which might look good, but might look too filled in, like might look, if it's completely black without any details at all showing, that might not look the best on a sky dome. So you might want to go in and, for instance, do an image adjustment and a shadows highlights, in which case it will actually remove the shadows or really lighten them up so that you can actually see some details in the shadows. But you don't probably want to have that much because that's going to look washed out and you're not going to get some of the lighting that will actually look good. So in that case, I'd probably pull this back a little bit, and I might want to pull my highlights up a little bit. That's actually going to give me a little extra details sometimes in the lighter areas, which sometimes blow out a little bit. So you'll notice that when I pull this up a little bit, I get a little more details in the highlight parts of the sky, but maybe we don't want too much. We don't want to dull it down too much. So I'm going to pull the tone back, which will bring those back up, but they'll still be a little more detailed than they were originally. And the same thing up here under amount, I might pull the amount down a little bit, or I might pull the tone down a little bit. And that way I get some details in the shadows. I'm pulling out a little bit of details in the shadow, and rather than complete black in some of those shadows. And you can tell by going to preview and turning it off, and you'll see what the original looked like, which had a lot of really darks in there. And when I put this on, you can see that I've really brought up those darks quite a bit, maybe too much, actually. I might want to pull this down a little bit and maybe pull the mid-tone up a little bit to bring some of those darks back in there. But if I turn the preview off again, you'll see that it's still not as dark as it was. It's still a little lighter than it was. And you're seeing some details in the shadows that you didn't see before. And there is a little bit of a color enhancement on this one too, automatically. It's pulling up the color by 20, which is bringing those colors out even more than they were. So I think that's getting where it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and go with that one. I have the original. Anyway, I'll say okay to that, and I'll do a file. And I mean, you can do a lot of other things. You can see the generative fills down here. We could fill it with something else, um, like the sky or something if we wanted to. If we didn't like one of these things, we could try to generative fill it with something else. But I'm going to go ahead and just leave it there for now, just doing some color adjustments. If we didn't like the colors that are happening here, we could go to our hue saturation and change the hue to something else. You know, there's more oranges and greens then. We could take it to be more reds and purples. You know, which would be kind of freaky looking. But I probably don't want to take this too far away from its original 0 point. If I just want to tone it a little bit, I can take it one way or another. I don't think I would take it this way because it's just becoming too, this is a witches scene. And I think that I don't want to really take it too far into um, something that's going to be too happy looking. I could go a little bit more to the left and get some purples, sort of yellowish greens, and pull out the reds and the blues a little bit more in the sky. Makes it look a little bit more like sunset there. I could turn preview on and off to see what that looks like. I think that's kind of interesting. It's toning it a lot more. It is making the sky go a little bit more pink though, where before it was more red. So maybe I'll pull it back a little bit. I'm gonna just, for the sake of making something that's different than the original, I'm gonna say okay to that. And we could pull the saturation up, but probably I don't need to do that. That's probably gonna be too much. I could pull the saturation down if I want it to be more grayed out. But this is supposed to be a theatrical scene, so I do think that having some strong colors is probably gonna look good. I'll go ahead and save that. And I'll just put something at the end of the name here. I'll just put edited. Or actually, it might be easier to see if I put it at the beginning. All right, so I'll save that as a JPEG, full size. And then I would have to go to Convertio to convert it over here, which you can see I've already got Convertio open. I'm going to convert more files, choose file. It's going to open to the one that I just did. I'm going to choose that one, open it. I want to convert it to an HDR and go ahead and convert it. It's going to go from a relatively small file, like 8 megabytes, to probably around 90 megabytes. and it's completed. So it's 98 megabytes, almost 100 megabytes. I'll download it and it should go right into, actually it'll probably go to my downloads folder. So I can see it went into my downloads folder. We can go ahead and drag that into my other folders so that I have it. I've got a few here that I've done, and we'll just bring them over. So now if I'm go back in to here, I can move some of these HDRI files into my HDRI's folder by just dropping them in. And so the one that I edited was right here. Let's go ahead and we'll just check them both, see which one looks better. So this one is the edited one I just did. It's going to import it. And then this one here should be the original one. So yeah, radiant painting, that should be the original one. We'll go ahead and bring the original one in too. See what both of those look like. I have some other ones here that I also did. I might as well try those out too. So I'm going to pull this photo real one in. See what that looks like. And this one's a cinematic one, so we'll bring that over too. Cinematic realism. So we've got a few different things here from the folder that are equirectangular HDRIs now. One of them is not showing up. I don't think it's finished converting. This is actually not the one that I thought I was bringing in, but that's okay. Let's check some of these other ones out first. So let's go ahead and go to our edit plugins to turn on the HDRI plugin. I'm going to go to edit, choose plugins, and there is a HDR, just type in HDR, and you'll find an HDRI backdrop. That's what we want to use, but it's not turned on. Click it to turn it on. It'll say you have to restart. If you haven't saved in a while, it's going to ask you to save what you were doing, and then it's going to restart the system. Okay, now it's there. If I were to type in HDRI or HDR again, I'll see that the plugin's there, and it's turned on. So we'll just go ahead. We could dock this plugins if we were going to do any more, but I don't think we really need to do any more right now. I'll go ahead and close it. And I don't know why I went back to architecture again there. And why I have two content browsers open here. Okay, I'm going to close this one. So it goes back to just one content browser open. I'm going to say no. It's asking me, oh, it restarted. That's why. Okay. It's asking me if I want to open up something that I had open. I'm gonna just say no to that right now. I don't really need anything else right now. So what I need to do is I'm gonna add the HDRI backdrop. And you do that by going to the little plus symbol. It looks like a cube with a green plus next to it at the top of my 3D window here. I'm going to click on that. And this is where you add things to the scene. And I want to go to where it says all classes. And I'm going to type in right here, HDR, and HDRI backdrop comes up. I'm going to move my cursor slightly down, and sorry, it kicked out of there. I'll try that again, HDR. We'll just move the cursor slightly down. It's right there, HDRI backdrop. It was kept kicking me out, probably because my mouse. I'm going to go ahead and choose it. And it puts an HDRI backdrop in that's sort of default part of the system. I'm going to want that to be sort of centered in the world. So I'm going to go, it's selected. You can see it's been added to the world as HDRI backdrop. And it's still selected, and it's showing me the details of that, and the image, the cube map it's using, the equirectangular image is called a cube map, and it's plugged in there. It's called Approaching Storm 4K. And I want to center this in the world, so I'm going to click the little arrow button next to location to center it. Set everything back to 0, 0, 0. Scaling is always 1. And you can see that now it looks like my Metahuman is standing on that world. And if I go in to that world and rotate around, or if I hold my Alt key and rotate around, you can see that we can see it's basically a dome. It's got a flat bottom, which the Metahuman is standing on, and then it's got a circular top. And the size of that is 150. You can see in the details panel over here on the left. You can adjust these a little bit. There is the transforms, which I reset. But down below that, there's some important things for intensity, size, projection center. There's an advanced thing you can open by clicking on the arrow and see more things that you can adjust. What you're going to notice if you look in the background of this image towards the horizon, you're going to notice that some of the things which look like trees are going to be like squashed down because they're on the bottom of the dome. And if you go to where it says projection center and you hover over the 170 and until it turns into 2 arrows, and you click with your left mouse button, drag to the right, you're going to see that you can push that image out till those trees actually go up on the wall and don't look distorted anymore. So you can also go, so I've now put it around 500, and the trees are actually going up the wall. You can rotate by hovering over the rotation channel, Z channel, the blue one, and let it turn into arrows, and then you can rotate the whole thing. So there's a bench in the background there, for instance. And that bench initially, if I pull this back down to like 150, was probably on the ground and getting distorted. And by pulling it out to more like 500, that bench is actually on the sides of the dome and doesn't look distorted anymore. And that's why you want to choose a skybox, which will have some space, because if it's on the bottom of the dome, anything's going to be distorted on the bottom of the dome. It should just be ground. And then you're going to cover it up with some actual 3D ground, because that's going to look better, and you'll be able to make it sort of match the background. So if I go over to the right here under the stuff that's in my scene, and if I hover over the different lighting things, there's a lighting folder here with different directional light, height, fog, sky, atmosphere, everything in there. These are things in my scene, and if I hover over one, I get a little eyeball symbol, which I can turn on and off. If I turn that eyeball symbol off for directional light, you actually see it gets darker, but it doesn't get black. The shadow goes away for the character and some of the highlights. What's happening is the character is still being lit by the HDRI backdrop through the intensity setting, even though there's no lights in the scene anymore. If I were to pull that intensity setting up by hovering over that channel and pulling it up, you'll see the character will get brighter, as if the character is being lit. And if I hover over the rotation in Z again and start rotating it, you might see that the lighting is changing on the character, because the lighter parts of this image are going in different places. So if you have a sun, it's actually going to light the character a little bit based on what you have that intensity setting set to. I'm going to turn, I didn't get rid of the directional light, so it's still there. I'm going to turn it back on, and we should see a little bit of the shadow. But you can't see the shadow as much from the directional light because I turned the intensity of the background up, and that's actually filling in the shadow a little bit. And probably I don't probably want the intensity to be that high right now. I might. But I'm going to put it back down to 1, and then I'll see the shadow more, because the directional light is controlling the lighting more. If I select the directional light and zoom out a little bit, I can actually see where it is. It's above the character. And if I use the WER keys on my keyboard, I can switch between move, rotate, and scale, WER, and E is rotate. And right now I'm in global rotation, which is on the top of the window here. You can switch between a local rotation or a global rotation. It can make a difference. For something like this, a directional light, I might want to use the local rotation. And I can, or I might, if I just want to rotate it globally around the Z, I'll click this blue, I'll put it in global again, click the blue one, and now that shadow is going to move to different places as the light rotates. Now the light is actually behind the character, kind of coming towards me. And if I grab the red one, I might want to actually switch to local and grab, say, the blue one here and rotate it to make that shadow longer. And it's going to ultimately probably change the tone, because it's going to actually put what's a hidden sun back there. It's going to make the light be more like sunset. There are other things here like exponential height fog that I could click on and turn on and off to see if it makes a difference. You see the background's clear when the exponential height fog is off. So it's adding a little fog to the scene. Sky atmosphere, change the tone of the whole scene. Skylight might not be doing anything. Yeah, it's actually doing quite a bit. So skylight is actually affecting it more with the directional light. Sky sphere is not really doing much, and volumetric cloud is probably not doing much. So these things are actually behind the HDRI backdrop. If I turn off the volumetric cloud, you see it's turning off the clouds up there. But because they're behind the HDRI backdrop, which I just turned off, we don't see that. Now, if I go into my HDRI backdrop again, I select it. I want to change the cube map from this default one to one of these ones that I brought in. So I'm going to go ahead and pull over the one that I edited. Actually, let's pull over the original one first. And I'll drag it onto the cube map. It turns blue. And I drop it. And now we can see what that looks like. And we see that it looks pretty good, but it's kind of big. I think that maybe I might want to go ahead and increase the size of this from 150 to maybe 500 and hit enter. It's the size of the HDRI backdrop. That didn't really change much, and it did change the color though a lot because I think the fog is affecting it more. If I turn off the fog again, I'll probably see that it's the fog which is affecting it. Because of my fog settings, the fog is further off, so it's actually affecting it a little bit more. But it didn't really affect my the look of it that much. I'm going to zoom down here closer to the character to get a little better idea of what that look is. And so, you know, you can try out different things on the scaling of this. It's not really changing much as far as the actual scale. It's changing the coloring because of the fog. I can still push all that up a little bit. Well, if I put it down to like 100, actually it did make it a little smaller, right? So I think maybe that's where I want it to be a little smaller. And you see that I'm adjusting the projection center. I want those rocks there to be on the dome and not on the bottom. But I want them to just kind of be starting out. But you notice it does push the horizon line higher. And I don't want my horizon line to be too high here. So maybe I'll leave it right there. Now, if I pull up the intensity on this, I will be able to see some of the stuff happening on this particular backdrop, how it's going to affect the lighting. Like I could pull this up, intensity up, and it will fill in some of the lighting with the colors from the backdrop. You notice that the backdrop looks pretty light, so maybe I want to try a different one. Let's try the edited one and see if that looks better or worse. Actually, that one has more colors popping out. So it is lighter too, but I got more reds on the boulders and stuff, which I kind of like. Let's try a different one though. Let's try this one here, which I didn't edit at all. And you can see that one is sort of a space one. And we could rotate it to see what's back there. There's the sun behind, and if I rotate it around, the sun is eventually going to get in front, and the character's face will be brighter. And I would want to make my, like if I was going to put the sun behind, let's say I was going to put the sun, let's say I put the sun right there. That's actually kind of accurate for where my directional light is pointed. And I might want to adjust the colors of the directional light, or I might want to adjust the intensity of the directional light. There is some advanced settings that I can look on the directional light to see. You can see there's a lot of settings in here. But if I were to change this light to be more purple, let's say I change that light to be more purple, you'll see a little purple edge along the Metahuman's shoulder there, because I changed it to be more purple. Using my middle mouse button to drag up. If I increase that, you'll see that light pop out even more on the hair and on the side of the character. And the shadow becomes darker. So those are some of the things you can do to sort of place your character into your scene and see what it's going to look like. I'm ignoring the stuff on the ground where the water is because I would want to replace that with some actual geometry. Now, if I go back to one of these other ones for the HDRI backdrop, that lighting may not fit anymore. So I might want to go over and rotate this one around till I see where the lighting's coming from in it. I don't think this one actually has any sun in it. So I probably just want to find something that looks good or interesting and look at the shadows that are on the ground to kind of tell where the light should be coming from. So I like the way these ones are kind of red, have some red on them. And what that means is that there's some kind of red sunset happening towards the right of the screen here. So I might want to go to my directional light and just go so I can see where the shadow is, and maybe zoom out a little bit until I can see the directional light. And I'll just switch to my global point of view and just rotate this a little, this directional light a little bit, so that the light is going to be going towards the side. And I don't know whether, you have to click on it to see whether global or local is going to be the best thing for this. But I think probably maybe for this, for what the lighting I'm seeing here, I might want to have it going at this angle right here, something like that. You can also rotate down here. And it may not be exactly the way you think it should be. It's rotating on the local axis. So maybe something like that. And then maybe I would want more of a red light coming from that side. And it'll really show up if I bring some 3D boulders in here to see what that's going to look like on the character. So I think that's fine for now. For the lighting, it's got kind of got an initial setup. I can turn off again the fog if I want to see it, how much the fog is affecting the background. It doesn't really seem like it's affecting it that much anymore. I'll go back to the HDRI backdrop. Yeah, it's not affecting it because of the size of this backdrop. I made it a lot smaller. So if I want to see some 3D ground here, then I'd want to create some landscape. Right now, there is a floor in here, but it's hidden, it's underneath there. And I'm just gonna delete it because I really don't need it. And instead, I'm gonna create a ground that's gonna be above the bottom of this, this dome that I'm using. And I might want to move the dome down a little bit. If the HDRI backdrop is setting right at the 0 axis, but I might want to move it to like, negative 100, so it's down a little bit. And what that's going to do is it's going to mean the character is not on the floor anymore. But when I put the floor in, I can make it so that the character will be on the floor. See the shadows not coming off of his feet anymore. There's an advantage to that. Now the ground plane won't be sitting right on top of the bottom of this HDRI backdrop. I'm gonna go ahead and save all. because I've done quite a bit. And I'm going to go ahead and add a ground plane by going to selection mode. And I'm going to go to landscape mode. And it's going to create a landscape, and you might want to use your right mouse button to orbit and then use your WER keys or your Q key. What this is going to do, the WASD allows me to zoom in and zoom out with W and S, side to side with A and D, but I also have R, which can go up. Let's see, let me just make sure I'm holding it down. Let me just turn off landscape mode. So sometimes the cursor doesn't work right when your machine is kind of crunching inside of Unreal Engine. It's not actually recognizing the keys that it's supposed to recognize. It's recognizing some of them, but it's keeping me in a mode that's not allowing me to zoom upwards, which is annoying. Because I would like to be able to zoom up. But what I can do is I can sort of use my S key to zoom up a little bit. And I can then see what that sky dome looks like. And being up here, if I in landscape mode, is going to allow me to see the size of my landscape. And if I zoom out a little bit more, I'll see that it's way, way bigger. Currently, in how I would create this, it's way, way bigger than what I need it to be. So I'm gonna actually make it smaller by changing a few of the settings here. It's defaulting to 63 by 63 quads, 1 by 1 sections. That's making 63 grid units here for every one of these big squares that it's making on the ground, each one of these sections. Those are 1 by 1 sections, and there's 8 across the entire thing of these big squares. Overall, it's becoming around 500 grid units. And if you remember, I made my sky dome to around 100. So it's quite a bit bigger. One easy way for me to make it smaller would be to just switch it to be not so many quads. And so if I do 31 by 31, for instance, then you're going to see it automatically gets smaller. So it's half the size, it's 250 now. And it's okay if I do kind of want it to intersect the sky dome. And it's okay if it goes further out than it. So I could keep reducing this. I could go down to 15 by 15, which will make it just a little bigger. And I don't think there's really much of an advantage to having larger grids there of the larger grid, because you still have the 1 by 1 sections. So I think that's probably fine. And then I can just hit create. I don't need to fill the world. I only need this one piece of landscape. I could give it a material, but I haven't downloaded any materials yet, so I'm just going to create this. And it's set on new. I'm in manage right now. So now I have this ground plane coming through, and if I use my W key to zoom back into my character, where my character is, I'll see that my character is like halfway into the ground. So if I um, go back to selection mode, I go find that landscape that I just made and take a look at it, I'll see that it's 100 units up and negative 6,000 by negative 6,000 in the X and Y positions. You want to leave that because that's actually centering the landscape around the center of the world, because the actual center of the landscape is in the corner. And so this is pushing it over negative to the left and back to the left to make it centered around this world center. The thing is, this 100 units up, I pushed the background 100 units, or the sky dome, down 100 units. So now this one's doesn't need to be that high. I can put 0 in there and push it back down, and then it should be the correct level for the character's height. So now I can see that the character's standing on the ground, and the ground plane is there, and it's being tinted red because of the red light that I put in. It's maybe too much of a red light. Might want to change that because it is heavily tinting it red right now. What I might want to do is create a spotlight and maybe have more of a normal colored light and have a red spotlight to create the red highlights that are on the stones back here on the 3D objects. I can leave it the way it is right now and see what it's going to look like. But it might make everything too red the way it currently is. So I'm going to go ahead and try to give some variation to this ground plane. I'm going to hold the Alt key down and zoom out a little bit. And I want to see the ground behind it has some variations and stuff in it. Let's do a save all. I want to add some of that to this ground. It's too flat. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back from selection mode to landscape mode with the landscape selected. And I want to add maybe some variations. Right now, there's a layer, which is the first layer of this. And I want to add an additional layer for sculpting some waviness to the background to sort of make it match the sky dome a little better. So the way you do add a new layer, I'm going to keep this layer because this is my base layer, which is just flat. And then I'm going to right click it and create a new layer. And I can right click that new layer, which is called layer 1, and rename it to sculpt. And do some sculpting on that layer. So layer 1 is always there. This is non-destructive. If I get rid of this layer because I don't like it or something, then it'll go back to the flat that it is right now. You can kind of see the brush on there. It's really too big. I'm going to pull the size down. Now you can see it a little better. It's a better size. I'm going to brush back here to create some variations. I'm gonna, again, my other keys are not working, but I want to be up a little bit above it to see where I'm gonna be brushing. I want to brush around here. I don't really want to brush right here. I want to keep this center area kind of flat. And if I just start brushing here, if I just start hitting it, I'm going to just get waves, right? I'm just going to get some nice soft brush with a fall off. And you see I've got a 0.5 fall off on this. But I can go and use these alpha brushes or the pattern brushes to get a little bit more interesting shapes. So right now I'm in sculpt mode, and hitting it will pull it up, and then holding shift down will push it down, back down a little bit. And there is a smooth mode here. There's an erase mode and a flatten mode. There's different modes. I'm going to go and switch to the pattern brush mode, click on next to texture, and because we loaded up those resources, there's lots of different textures in here. Something like a noise might do a good job. If I put noise on, for instance, and I want to look at the strength, just don't make it too much. Mine's at 0.2. If I hit that with some of that noise, and maybe maybe I need a little bigger brush. Let's say I hit this entire section with that noise. I can see that it's pushing it up with, or if I hold shift down, it'll push it down. And it's got some shapes in there, but it's not actually very good. So I'm gonna go and choose something different, something with a little bit more interesting stuff happening in it. I want something organic. And any kind of texture that has some interesting things happening might work. Like, I don't know what this texture is, but there's a color one and a normal one. I mean, you can use the color one and see if it's doing anything. Yeah. Okay, I put world space on, and I saw that it's creating some interesting shapes there. Bringing up some kind of rocky looking things, and you can again hold the shift key down and it's going to push down a little bit. But if you go too far with that, it's going to start cutting through back into the sky dome. So I don't want to push it down too far. But I'm kind of just looking at how that looks and to see if it's looks like it's too sharp. And you may not be able to tell until you go back to selection mode, for instance, and you might want to try hitting play. Play is going to bring me to where the player start is, which I can see that it's sitting right on top of the character. So you might want to select your player start in the upper right, hit W and move it away from the player character just a little bit. this direction so that you're going to be basically coming up looking at the character right in front of it. So if I hit this play button, it's going to simulate and take me down to that player start. And it's actually facing away from the character, but there I can see what that background looks like, what the waves that I was making with that particular brush was doing. And it looks okay. It's got some variation in it that might match the background. I think it needs more. I probably want to have some more there. So let me just zoom up a little bit, and I'm going to put some right around there. I can see that I've actually got quite some sharp stuff going on there, which I probably don't want. So if I switch back to landscape mode, I might actually want to go into smooth and put that down a bit and just get rid of some of those really sharp ones that are there. I don't want anything too sharp. Which might look kind of weird. And let me just switch back to this one here, and I'll pull my strength and size down a little bit. And let's choose something else. Let's just try maybe, I don't know, one of these cobblestones. I can see it's doing something. Oh, I've got smooth on, that's why. Okay, let me try it without smooth on. Again, I'm getting some kind of sharp things happening here. I want to get some variations, but I might need to smooth a few of those out afterwards, depending on what it does. So let's try that. Let's go back to hitting play again and seeing what that looks like. Okay, so I really kind of need to see a texture on this now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit escape to stop it. Make sure you always stop it whenever you hit the green button to play the simulation. I'm going to go back to selection mode, and with the landscape selected, I'm going to go and plug in a landscape material in the details here. And for that, I need to go to Bridge and download something for that. So under Surfaces, and again, to get to Bridge, if you don't have Bridge docked already, it's under Window, Quixel Bridge. Under Bridge, you need to be logged in, but once you're logged in, you should be able to go to Home to see everything that's in Bridge. And what I want is Surfaces. So I'm going to go to where it says Surfaces here. And there's a whole section for like ground. You can go through, you can do searches on things, or you can click through these different categories. But I know that I want something that has to do with the ground. And if I look over here at that background, it's kind of like grassy with maybe some roots and stuff. Could have some stones on it. I'm going to just pick an overall ground. I'm not going to set up to paint different textures on the ground yet. That's something that the video that I referenced on YouTube has that in it. I'm just going to put an overall ground texture right now to try to get something that looks somewhat close to that, but doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm going to look through here and see if I can find some grass that has some roots or rocks or something in it. Could be mossy. This rocky step might be good. That might actually look kind of good. So I'm going to use medium quality here. Again, I could use highest quality. Some things you can use nanite quality. I'm just going to use medium quality for these to check them out. I can always download them again at a higher quality. But here's medium quality, and I'm going to add that to my scene. And then you're going to find it under a Megascans folder, surfaces, and here you see the one that I just downloaded. It opened it up automatically, and you can see the three textures it's using. There's a color texture, a normal texture, and a roughness texture. I'm going to use the material instance, and I want to drag it over onto where it says landscape material. So find the material instance, left mouse button, drag it. It turns blue, which means it will accept it. Drop it on there, and you can see what that material is going to look like. It doesn't look bad. It's like I said, it's red. So I might go back to the directional light for a second and change the light back to just plain white. Could have a little bit of yellow or something in it maybe, but I'd like to see what these textures look like in their natural color. So I'm just going to change it back to a white light. And that's a very bright white light. Maybe it's a 26 intensity. I'm going to bring it back down to like 5 because it's kind of blowing out the texture. I can't really see what's going on there. So now I got a white light. It's 5. I could bring it all the way down to 1, which is kind of the default for the light. And for this is not giving me hardly any shadows. So let's put it back up to 3. And then I'm going to open up the texture by double clicking the material instance. And now I have this floating window. Instead of docking it, I'm going to pull it over a little bit to the right here. And I'm going to open up the global settings and turn on tiling. And I'm going to go open that up by clicking on the arrow. And I'm going to set the tiling from 1 to 1 down to like 0.5 by 0.5 X and Y. And you see it makes the tiling bigger by setting it smaller. So 1 is actually tiled quite a lot, and that means repeating the texture over and over again. You can notice that it's being repeated. You can also hover over these and make them not exact, like I 0.5 and 0.5. I could drag that to make one of the UV axes different than the other one. It might make it look stretched if I do that too much, but sometimes that might look good. Oftentimes they will be the same though, like 0.5 and 0.5. You can also move them across the surface with the offset there. There might be a reason for doing that. And you can go down here to the normal and open it up and turn it on and pull it up above 1 if you wanted to have stronger shadows and look more bumpy, but it might get ugly at some point. And you can take your roughness and open it up, and you can increase the max roughness and the min roughness. Sometimes that's going to make it look less shiny. Also the specular, you can go into the base specular and reduce that if you're getting too much highlights. See, when I reduce that base specular, I'm seeing more colors because it was the highlights from the light which were actually reflecting a lot on this surface. So that actually looks better. You can also tint it by going into the albedo and turning on albedo tint. If I wanted this to have a little bit of a yellow tint, for instance, or green tint, I can tint the ground plane if I'm trying to match the background and the background looks like it has a particular tinting. Okay, so I could try different materials too. Go back to bridge and choose a different one. But I think I'm going to leave it at that. And I'll come back in here and try a few other ones later. So there's a lot of stuff you can go through. It might take a little while to find one that is a really good base one that sort of matches the look of your scene. But then I can go in here and I can also go to 3D assets and start looking for things that might fit the background of this scene. I'm going to do a save all first. Like for instance, the rocks in the background, I'd like to have some rocks like that. And so in Bridge, I can look for different types of rocks. You can see that there are some right here automatically. And if I look at that background, I might see moss on the rocks or something, and that might be something that I want to do a search of to see if I can find mossy rocks. Or you might just go through and look for nature, for instance, has rocks. It has different kinds of rocks. And there might be also some roots that we can grab. And some ruins and stuff. Here's a bunch of mossy rocks. That's a rock that looks kind of like one of the rocks that is in the scene, I think. Here's another one that could be, has some similarity to rocks in the scene. So when you find a rock that you think might work, like this beach rock here may not be perfect, but it's got a base to it. And that might look okay. We could try it out by downloading it at medium quality. Shouldn't take very long to download that. Add it to the scene. You get the textures and you get an actual static mesh. That's what I want to find. And I would want to drag it into my scene and find a place for it that would work. Scale it up. Move it. Maybe rotate a little bit too. I've got my step on. I'm going to turn those off so that I can smoothly rotate this. To the best angle for whatever my ground is doing. And then I can move it and intersect it a little bit with the ground so that it kind of sticks up out of the ground. And I can start placing rocks back here, actual 3D rocks, to try and match. I don't think this one is a great match. It could be a small one in the ground that I could use. But I think for these big rocks, I need to find something more square, maybe with some of those discolorations on it. Now you notice that my lighting's not looking great right now. It changed a little bit on the background. I don't think that's the fog, because it's not big enough for fog. It's some other stuff happening just with the lighting in general. What you're going to want to do is maybe go back and look at some of these things. Like I've got this set to intensity of 3. I could try putting that down to 1 and see if that looks better. It does look a little better. And then I could, what I probably need to put in here is under your add here, go to volumes and find post-process volume and add that into your scene. And in the settings of it, do a search over in the details for INF, infinite, extent, unbound. And you want to turn that on. And then make sure that you delete that text that you put in, because it'll keep you from seeing all the different parameters. And then go down in the post-process volume. What that does, turning that on, makes it affect the whole scene. And I'm going to go find exposure, which is the second thing in here. I'm going to turn on metering mode and set it to manual. And the whole thing will go black. And then I'm going to turn on exposure compensation, and I'm going to start pulling it up to the right until the scene starts to come back again. And I'm going to bring it up until I think it's a good setting for my scene. So working with this and my skylight setting, whatever my, or not my skylight, my directional light setting is going to allow me to sort of get this to an amount that will look good. You know, I can pull that red light back in, or maybe I want to leave this one more more normal, maybe a little bit warm. Then put an actual red, create over here an actual red spotlight to shine on a certain area. So with that spotlight selected, I'm going to move it and rotate it. And so I'm looking at it, but I'm not seeing, so I really need to maybe zoom up a little bit and see, am I actually hitting the character here or am I missing it? And I am hitting it actually, but I'm hitting it, I can see I'm hitting it from the back. So I kind of need to move it a little bit. Try to get that at a better angle for this character. And maybe I want to be using more local settings on this. So it's getting a little better. We can take the inner and outer cone out a bit. Now I'm starting to see it. So when I'm actually going in here and starting to really develop the lighting and stuff and putting objects in there, I'm going to want to see this from a camera viewpoint. So I need to actually add a camera to this as well. I'm going to pause this for a second. Okay, so let's make a quick camera here. So what you're going to do is you can go to the plus symbol here and go to cinematic and create a cinecamera actor. And the cinecamera actor is going to be a camera that you'll be able to see through. You can see that I have it over here in my world or in my scene now, and I'm going to go ahead and call it main cam. And I want to look through that camera while also being able to see the regular world. If I have the camera selected, it actually gives me a view of it, but I would prefer to actually have a couple of windows here. So I'm going to change my window setup a little bit. Go to the upper left of your 3D window, click on the pancake symbol, go down until you find layouts, and you can make a side-by-side layout. Then we can go in and set one of these to be the camera view by switching to lit view here where it says wireframe. And I want to switch from top to perspective. And then I'm going to switch to the cinematic viewport, which takes away all of the sort of gizmos and manipulators and just shows me the sort of the render view. And then I want to go and turn on main cam. So now I'm looking through that main cam, and on the right-hand side, I'm just using a regular perspective viewport. So I can move around in this viewport and manipulate that camera. And if we want to put the camera right at the middle of the world, we can click here to move it to the middle of the world. And then I can start moving it around to try and I'm going to rotate it. So it's kind of looking towards the character, towards the metahuman. And then I'm going to hit the W key so I can move it backwards. I'll hold the Alt key down and orbit a little bit so I can grab the X-axis and drag it backwards. And so I'm zooming back. I'm going to continue just manipulating a little bit. Maybe I'll go back a little further, go a little up, and we can stop right there for right now. And what I'm going to do is switch to or go to the details panel, and I'm going to find the focal length of that camera. So it's a little bit further down, and I'm going to turn that to 12. And that's just going to allow me to see more of the world. And then I can tilt the camera by switching into rotate. And I'll just rotate a little bit so we can see a little bit more of the world. We can always zoom in on that. But I think that at least gives me a view of what's there, and I can make that view bigger on the right here if I want to. So now I can start developing this landscape with the lighting and everything all together. So we can go back to our spotlight and continue working on the how that light is shooting onto the character. It looks like it needs to maybe be rotated a little bit. We can hit F to frame that and again, sometimes if my computer is crunching, it might actually not take what I'm doing with the keyboard shortcuts that I'm using. I'm not sure why that happens, but it's definitely something that sometimes happens. Also, your cursor might disappear a little bit when you move it into the 3D view. So that's a little better. Still not placed quite in the right place. So I'm going to add some additional rocks and things. Let's go ahead and save this. And so at this point, I would go back over and start to um, add some rocks that I think would better fit. So I'm just going to look through here and see if I can find something that looks a little more square, like the stones that are back there. And I'm going to want something to shine a light on to create shadow puppetry. So I'm going to need a big flat type of stone at some point. One of these might work for the smaller stones. So let's say I grab one of these beach boulders here, download it, add it to my scene, find it, and then drag it in. So I just drag the static mesh in. I'm going to scale it up. To probably something like 30 by 30 by 30. It's not quite the right shape. I mean, it is kind of similar to some of the shapes in the background boulders, but maybe if I rotate it, I might be able to find a shape that would work. it's a little off, and maybe the texture isn't quite right. But we can place it back there. And let's switch to, I'm gonna pull this out so I can see some of my controls for manipulating. And I would like this to be, angled. Maybe something like the boulders that are behind it. So if I look at what I'm doing, I can see that it is too bright, and I'm gonna need to do something. Either I need to look at the texture map of that. So some of the things, I mean, part of it's the lighting, but part of it can also be the texture map itself on that object. So for instance, I did this with the ground. There's a roughness in here that you can pull this up, take the base specular and pull it down. And maybe bring the normal map up on it. We could tint it. But this should be changing some of the stuff that's happening on that material. But I'm not seeing a lot of change happening there. So probably I need to go look at things like our directional light and what that's set to. And some of the other lights that are here. I think that texture map in general might be just wrong for this scene. So I could either switch it out for a different texture on this particular object. And what you can see is the static mesh of this object that's in the scene. Has a material. We could put a different material on it. If we like the shape of it, we could try a different material. And so I could go back over to Bridge, find a different material. Now, it may not be great because this material is presumably the one that they actually photogrammetry onto this rock, so it was actually like this in the wild, but there's no reason why you couldn't go take a look and see about other surfaces that might have a different rock material. We have all these stone materials here, and there might be something in here that would look good on that. These look actually like a lot of repeated textures, so that probably wouldn't be good. These are too smooth. I mean, we could try it. Let's try downloading this one and see what happens. So I just brought down a new surface. It was a stone marble. And I'm just going to see what the material instant looks like on this one. And yeah, actually it looks better. And you also can tile it then, because this one's going to have a tiling feature. And if I want it to be bigger or smaller, I could adjust the tiling accordingly. You know, whatever I want it to be. I actually think it looked pretty good with just the regular 1-1-1 tiling. And then we could put some normal map on here to give it a little bit more roughness, and control some of the other things that we controlled earlier, like the specular. So it still looks a little bright to me. I think I would want to continue trying to adjust that. There's some other settings I could look at as well on this object. But if we go up here and switch to immersive mode, we can see that full screen and just see what the lighting is looking like there. Maybe that texture is not great. It looks a little fuzzy, a little bit not clear. Part of that could also be that we don't have a level sequence. So it says that down at the bottom there is that we'll go back out of immersive. In the upper right, there's a little button you can click to go back out of that. Sometimes when things look blurry like that, it's because you need to create a level sequence. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my content. I'm going to right click any of these sort of open areas in there. Make a new folder, going to call it sequences. And I'm going to go to the very top where there is a little clapboard symbol. I'm going to click on it and add a level sequence. And I'm going to call this just scene start. And I'm going to save it into the sequences folder and save it. And then once you have a level sequence, we will want to have the camera in that level sequence, so you can drag the main cam down from the upper right into here to put it in the level sequence. Probably should have made it a little longer, but I can adjust that later. But that just gets rid of that warning, and it might make the scene look better, or it might not. It might just be the texture map. Looks like that texture map maybe does need to be tiled more. That could be a reason why it looks so blurry. So we could go back to the content browser, find that small beach rock again, or the surface that I was just adjusting, open it up, and just I do think maybe it does need to be tiled more. Let's try 5 and 5. Or maybe that's too much. 3 and 3. And then we'll take a look at it again. Just save it and close it. Go to immersive mode again. And that looks much better. So yeah, it was a tiling thing. So there's a lot of stuff that you can go through. Just look through it and see if you can find, start building out a scene, and put some variation in the ground plane, and look at those other videos that I referenced. If you want to paint different textures onto the ground plane, you can create a shader for that. And then we will continue working on these as we go along. But this should give you something to get you started.